Welcome back to another Excel VBA tutorial. Today's video, we are actually going to cover an interesting topic, a topic that somebody who had watched one of my previous videos had requested. Let me see if I can figure out who it was exactly, because I'm going to feel bad if I don't mention them. Where? Ooh, I got a couple comments today. Nicole was the one who recommended this one. So Nicole had asked, hey, I have a pivot table that I want to export to Outlook, but I have a problem because I have basically like 50 different filters that I have to set, and then I'm gonna have to do this for each email, and it's very tedious, right? And so basically the question was, how do you export a pivot table to Outlook, but then at the same time as you're exporting, do you dynamically change the filter, right? So the idea is that you would change a filter, once it's all changed, you would then copy it and then paste it into a new email. And so that's what we're going to do in today's video. Is we're going to be showing you how to copy a pivot table over to Outlook using Excel VBA. And at the same time, before you would actually copy it, you would dynamically change the filters. So to give you a little bit of an overview of kind of what we're working with so far, we have a data table. It's nothing too crazy, but you can tell there's definitely columns of data. For those of you who have seen my original pivot table series that was done many, many months ago, this is exactly the same data set. And so this data table is then formatted into a pivot table. And right now I have a very simple pivot table, just 2 columns. And then I have 3 filters. Now, the goal is to change the pivot table filters based on the columns inside of this little range of cells. So the idea is that for the first email, it would be set to January 2014. The second email would be June 2014. The third email would be December 2014, and so on and so on and so on. So the idea is that we would loop through this range of cells, change the filters, copy the pivot table, export it to an Outlook email. So that's basically the general idea of what we want to create. As you can tell right here, the only thing I've really done with this particular range of cells is I am using the unique formula, and with the unique formula, if it returns an array of unique values, then it spills it over to the other array. So this is kind of Excel's dynamic arrays or spill functions. I don't know exactly what the official term is, but that's basically it. And then I have given this first column a name. And so you can see here it's called filter month name. The reason I'm doing that is because when we go into VBA, it's a little bit easier to reference a named range than it is with a unique kind of a changing one. It's not to say you can't use the original one. You very much could, but this is just going to be a little bit easier. Alrighty. So with that being said, let's jump into our Visual Basic editor. So I'm going to go to my developer tab, then my Visual Basic icon. And then from here, we're going to want to insert a new module. So I'm going to go to Insert Module. And then I'm going to do export to Outlook. Now, I already have that there, so I'm going to give it a different name. I'll just call it video, something simple. And then once you've done this, every time we export to specific applications, we do have to enable a reference library in order to help with code development. So this will enable IntelliSense with the different object models that we're planning to work with. In this case, we're going to be working with 3. We're going to be working with the Excel object model. Obviously, we're going to be working with the Outlook object model as well. And then additionally, we are going to be working with the Word Outlook model. So a lot of people, when they're new to Outlook, they don't realize that actually every time you are creating an email, you're technically tapping into the Word object model. So there's actually a property inside of Outlook VBA that will return the entire Word object model. So in order for development purposes, you do need to enable the Word object library inside your code. So to enable those libraries, you're going to go up to Tools, down to References. Now, I already have them enabled because I've written the code before, so mine are right up at the top. More than likely, you are not going to have them at the top. You will notice here that I have Outlook and Word enabled, both the 16.0 object library. So all you would really want to do is just scroll down till you get to M for Microsoft. Your Outlook one will be right around here. You just want to make sure there's a check in the box, and that means it's enabled. And then you're going to want to go down just a tiny bit more, and you're going to want to look for the Word one. It should be right around here. Again, you want to do the latest version that you have. So if you have 16, you should do 16. Now, even though it's kind of infrequent these days, just because for the most part, I would say most individuals are on the latest version of Office to a certain extent. Even if they're on an earlier version, the object model hasn't changed drastically, so it's still the same object model. But just to be aware that if you were to send this code to somebody who was like on Office 2007, for example, or Office 2010, there's a very good chance that this code would not work for them. And so if you are planning to send it to somebody else, you want to make sure you unreference the libraries. And then when you send them the code, you tell them, hey, you need to go in there and you need to enable whatever version you're on. So just keep that in mind. Okay, let's get started. Just like any video, lots of variable declaration, but the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna create a new subroutine. I'm gonna call it pivot table to Outlook. Also, I did change the size of the font for this one. So this is like 150% zoomed in. I'm hoping, I'm assuming most people could see this. If this is a little too big, please let me know and I'll put it back down to 125%. But if right now it's on 150%. So if this is like perfect size for everybody, let me know and then I'll just keep it at 150% going forward. But if 125% look better, please let me know. Okay, so the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna declare our Outlook variables. These are the ones that are obviously referencing the Outlook objects. The first one is going to be the Outlook application itself. So I'm going to create an Outlook.application object variable. The next one is going to be my Outlook item. So inside of Outlook, they have different items. In this particular case, we want a mail item object. So there's like calendar items, there's contact items, note items, all sorts of different items. But in this case, we want a mail item that represents the actual mail item, so an actual email. And then we're going to want the Outlook inspector. So this one's kind of interesting. This is the inspector. When I think about the inspector from Outlook, imagine you had just created a new email like so. You would see it right here. So that is your Outlook inspector. So that is the inspector one there for you. Now, once you've done that, we're going to go on to the Word variables. So declare the Word variables. In this one, we're going to do O Word doc. This represents a Word document. So technically, when you create a new email, you've created a new Word document, and then you can start editing that document. So treat it very much as a document. And then next, we do need to paste it in a specific range in the document. So we're going to create a Word range object. So very different than an Excel range. It's a Word range, so a range within that document. And then we come to the Excel variables, And so with these ones, we're going to do pivot table. This obviously represents a pivot table object. And then our pivot table, we're going to grab a range from it. And so this is going to be a range object. We're going to call it pivot range. And then we're going to start going into some other ranges, but each one of these represents like a filter range or whatever it might be. So I'm going to declare my first one. It's going to be called filter range. This is going to be a range object as well. We are going to have a filter month name. This is also going to be a range object. We're going to have a filter year. This is also going to be a range object. Ooh, I don't want to do that. I'm going to put this up just a tiny bit. And then from here, we're going to have a, We're going to have a month name. So we're going to actually grab that value, and that's going to be a string. And then we're going to have a year number. I have it as a long for right now, but we are going to technically convert it to a string. So maybe we'll put this to a string. We'll see what happens. I'm not entirely sure if it's going to work, but we'll just try and see what happens. And then we need the pivot field. So the actual pivot filters that we want to change the value for. And so one's going to be for the year. So that's going to be a pivot field. And then we're going to also do a pivot month field. Oh, so many variables, right? So many. And then that's pretty much it. So those are all the Excel variables that you need to declare along with your Word and Outlook. Then from here, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to grab our Outlook application. Most people, though, have Outlook on their computer open in the background. So in this particular situation, what we're going to be doing is first trying to grab the active instance. So we're going to assume that they probably have it open in the background. But if they don't have it open in the background, then what we're going to do is we are going to create a new instance of the Outlook application. So grab the active Outlook application if it exists. And then we're going to say on error, resume next, because when you try to grab it, if it's not there, it does return an error. So try and grab the active instance. So we're going to say set look app, so the application object, equal to get object. This is a function inside of VBA. We don't need the path name, but we do need the class name. So we're going to say the Outlook.application. So this is the program ID, the kind of human-friendly version of referencing it. And then if there is an error, so if there is an error, create a new instance of Outlook. And so we're going to say if error dot number equals 429, then, and if from here we're going to say the first thing we're going to do is we're going to say error dot clear. So first clear the error and then create the Outlook app. And we're going to say set look app equal to a new Outlook.application. I think with this one, I don't think there is a visible property. I think as long as you just open it as is, you should be good. And then from here, that will create a new instance of Outlook if it's not already open. Now in my situation, you can see it's open, so it's just going to grab the active instance. Okay, and then from here, let's grab the pivot table object. So we're going to set the pivot table variable equal to this workbook, that property. We're going to go into our worksheets collection. I need my pivot table sheet that you can see right here. So I'm going to pass through the name of the sheets that I want to return. Each sheet has what we call a pivot tables collection. And then I need to grab the pivot table. Now, pivot tables have names, so you can pass through the name. If you want to find out the name, you select the pivot table, and then you go to pivot table analyze, and you'll notice, if I click this, I have pivot table name. So you can copy it like so, or you can be like me and just have your notes and then type it. But for this one, we're going to grab that name, and then this will grab the pivot table. Now, every once in a while, I like to make sure that my code's good. What I'm probably going to do from right here is I'm just going to test it to make sure everything works up until this point. I'm going to do pivot table dot name. So I'm just going to print out the name. You can see it's working up until this point. So I'm happy. I'm going to move on to the next portion, which is grab that filter range. So grab the filter range in the pivot table sheet. What do I mean? I want this. I want this little range right here, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to loop one by one and then go to the next column. So I'm going to use offset to just kind of go to the next column next to it. Now, I'm probably not going to do the entire range just because I don't want to do like 40 emails, but I will show you at least what it looks like if we do like just a full range, and then I'm going to kind of cut that range to a smaller slice. So I'm going to set the filter range equal again to this little thing right here. I'm just going to grab it and I'm going to do range And then this one is going to be filter month name. Now you might be saying, why are you using this, right? Remember, I named the range. So if I select it and I look over here, you notice how it says filter month name. I gave it a name. So I'm referencing the named range. Now, if I want to do a smaller slice of it, so grab a quote unquote smaller slice of the filter range, it's basically the same exact thing. I'm just going to literally cheat a little bit and just do like E2 through E4. So again, this is just, I don't want to do all of them, but if I wanted to just do a slice of it, I could just also do that as well. So again, play around with it. You're going to have to kind of adjust the code to meet your specific needs, but generally this is how you want to think about it as you're going through it. Okay, and then from here, let's loop through each filter month. So I'm going to say for each filter month name in filter range, next. Then from here, I'm going to keep going. I'm going to grab that month name. So I'm going to grab the month name. I'm going to just say month name equals filter month name. And then I'm just going to do the value. I'm going to grab the year number. I'm going to set that a year number equal to the filter month name dot offset. And then I'm going to do 0 rows, but I'm going to do 1 column to the right. And then I'm going to grab again the value. So I've grabbed my filters. Let's start filtering the pivot table. So let's clear all the filters. We'll clear all the filters. You don't technically have to do this, but if you're a little bit paranoid like me, you do it just to be a little bit safe, but you don't technically have to do this. It will slow down your code a little bit because we are adding an extra kind of action, but it's not going to be super dramatic. Then we're going to grab the year field. Well, what do I mean by that? I want this specific pivot field, and it's kind of hard to see right here, but it's under the filters, and it is considered a pivot field object. So I'm going to grab that specific field. I'm going to set the pivot year field equal to my pivot table. I'm going to go into my pivot fields collection, which simply represents all the fields in my pivot table. And I'm going to use the name of the field that I want to select. So in this case, out of all the pivot fields, return just the year field. Then from here, what you can do is you can set the filter. So set the filter. We're going to take our pivot year field and we're going to set it equal, or sorry, not equal. We're going to set the current page property equal to the year number. So very important that it's the current page property, current page property. You don't want to do anything else beyond that. There's kind of technically other ways of doing it. I found this one's the quickest and from what I can tell, the most reliable for this particular type of problem. So in this situation, do the current page property. And we're basically going to repeat this, but now we're going to do it for the month name field. So pivot month name, pivot month field, and we're going to do month space name. And then from here, I'm going to grab it again, and I'm going to paste it again. And in this situation, I want to set it equal to that month name, the month name. Okay, and then from here, we can now, assuming we've written it in such a way, I'm going to run it just one time just to see if everything is working as we expected it. At this point, I think it's more than appropriate to test the code. Looks like it's working great. I'm happy with that. So let's keep going on and making sure we can get this code written. So from here, grab the pivot field, or sorry, pivot table range. Now, here's the thing about pivot tables. There's actually multiple ranges that belong to it. It's kind of like a list object. Remember, there's a data body range, a list header range, and all this kind of other stuff. So part of it is you need to ask yourself, well, what range do I want? Do I want just the table or do I want the table and the filter? if you want the table and the filter, then you're going to set the pivot range. So set pivot range equal to the pivot table. There is a table range 2 property that refers to both the table, so this thing down here, and the filters. If you do not want the filters, then you're going to do, you guessed it, pivot table, and then you're going to want to do table range 1. Table range 1 does not include the filters. So I'm going to comment this out. I do want the filters in this situation. From here, create a new email. So I'm going to set our new OLOOK item object equal to our OLOOK app. I'm going to do a create item, and then I'm going to do an OL mail item. So I'm going to create a new item here. And I can also, if I want to be very cool, I'll put in the argument name. So I'm going to create a new email. With that new email, I'm going to start doing the fun stuff, which is formatting it, adding who it's going to be sent to, and all that kind of stuff. So with the new email, so with OLOOK item, and then I'm going to do end with. And then from here, let's start doing some. So just fill out the basic info. This is stuff like who you're sending it to and all that kind of stuff. So we're going to do the to property. I'm going to give a fake email. So abc@xyz.com. And then we're going to do cc equals abc. We'll just do the same one. We'll carbon copy the same email. And then we're going to do the subject, pivot table report for month and close, something like that. The body. So here is the body. Here is the pivot table report for the end of the month, something like that. And then in this case, we want to display the email. So we're going to say dot display. Then we're going to start getting the document itself. So the actual object that we need to start pasting into. So once we've displayed the email, get the active inspector. Inspector. I don't know why I was having such a hard time spelling that. So set the OLOOK inspector equal to the get inspector property. And then from here, you can grab the word editor. And then with this one, it's going to be set O word doc equal to the OLOOK inspector. And then you're going to want to do the word editor property. So I think at this point, this is kind of like your Word object model. So now you're going into the Word document range, or you're going into the Word object model kind of world at this point. So this is kind of when you're going to start seeing things change from a variable perspective. So what I'm going to do from here is I'm going to copy that pivot table. Copy the pivot table. I'm going to say pivot range copy. Now we've seen before copying between applications can be complicated. So Nicole, in your situation, if you are doing literally 100+ emails, you need to pause. You have to pause. I guarantee you will not make it through all the emails without it crashing at some point. So if I were even you, I would probably break it into chunks, maybe run 10 at a time or something like it. And then maybe just update your fields. So just pause it for a second or two. And then from here, we're going to do application dot wait. And then it's going to be now plus. And then I'm going to do just 1 second, literally 1 second. So this is to give enough time to make sure all the data makes it into the clipboard. I will tell you this, if you have a rather large pivot table, you should think about this as a relationship. So the more data you have, the longer it's probably going to take to get into the clipboard. So what you want to make sure is as your data set is growing, you might need to increase your pause time. So think of it as a relationship. Don't just say, oh, okay, I only have to pause at 1 second for any data set size. Don't fall into that trap. It can get a little confusing. So from here, define the range in the email. We want to paste the pivot table. So I'm going to set the O word range object to the O word doc. And then there is the application, the active document, and then I'm going to do the content. So I feel like this should be named different. I should call it like O word object model, but you guys can kind of see that, like I'm saying, this is kind of when you're stepping into that word object model world, and you can start seeing like now we are really getting into it. We're getting into our word object. So once you have that range, we're going to collapse the range. So normally when we're kind of working inside of a Word document, it's not just selecting a cell. You have to like, okay, am I going to go to the end of this selection or this one? So normally when we kind of talk about Word documents, we're collapsing. And so we're going to either the beginning or the start of a range. And so I'm going to say Word collapse end. I want to go to the end of that range. And then from here, insert a new paragraph. So I'm going to insert a new paragraph. I'm going to set the O word range equal to the O word doc. And then I'm going to do the paragraphs collection, and then I'm going to do the add method. So I'm going to insert a new paragraph and then make sure there is some space between the paragraph and the content. So I'm going to say O word range, insert break. There it is. Then from here, we finally did it. We can we can paste the pivot table in the email. So I'm going to take that O word range. There is a paste special method, unlike our wonderful publisher. And then we're going to do data type is going to be word paste. And then there is an OLE object. Here's the thing I've had so far with links. They don't seem to work with the pivot tables. That's not too surprising. Pivot tables are pretty complex when I think about Excel. And so the fact that links don't work is not necessarily surprising. They might work. Every time I ran this before, it was not working. So I've kind of shied people away from links. Ideally, if it's some kind of reporting aspect, I would imagine, I'm just guessing, that you didn't need to update links. You kind of would just say like, oh, here's the data, and then they can copy it and then do whatever what they want with it. So with that, we actually have everything. So we can try to see if this works. I'm going to first compile it just to make sure there's no like glaring errors, and then I'm gonna run it. Okay. And you can tell, of course, it didn't work that time. So this is not surprising because it does this a lot. Where is it? Sorry about that. I am always blown away by the things that can cause issues when it comes to working with VBA, and this has been by far the strangest error I've ever encountered. I don't understand why it's happening, but it is. Everything is working fine. So the only thing I literally had to change was, for whatever reason, by putting the item type. So by putting item type in here, it didn't like that. Don't ask why. I have no idea why putting a named argument would create such a issue, but apparently it does. So if you run into a copying issue, I guess it has to do with the fact that maybe you put in a named argument and you weren't supposed to. So again, just to recap, this does not seem to work well with Outlook. So you need to remove that. And so when you do that, this is how it's supposed to operate. And you can see that we actually get a pivot table that was pasted. Again, strange, odd. Those are just a few of the ways I could describe this interaction with Excel, VBA, and Outlook. Again, I don't think it's necessarily anything we should try to hide. I mean, bring it to attention and then adjust your code accordingly. But with that being said, that does conclude our video where we have now demonstrated how to take a pivot table object and then copy it over to an Outlook email using Excel VBA. And even though there's been lots of struggles, it does demonstrate it is possible. You just kind of have to be aware of all these little caveats that can get in the way of trying to successfully complete that task. So if you have any questions about the project that we had right here in front of us and kind of how to maybe extend upon it, or things that you can modify to maybe meet your specific goals, feel free to put those down in the comments below. Otherwise, in our next video, we're probably going to go back to some Python code again, and then possibly there's definitely more VBA content and some other stuff. But for right now, we're going to do some more Python. So thank you again for watching, everybody. We'll see you in the next video.